Hey, good Thursday morning, everybody. Welcome to the Volquest Mailbag Podcast. I'm Eric Kane alongside Rob Lewis, Brent Hubbs, and Austin Price. Big shout out, as always, to our friends over at Exterior Home Solutions. Roofing, siding, windows, garage. You can contact Exterior Home Solutions today, 865-524-5888, or online at exteriorhomesolutions.com. No better time than right now, Brent Hubbs, to join us on the General's Quarters at Volquest.com. A lot of talk out there about the recruiting calendar. Of course, Tennessee versus the NCAA, Tennessee hoops, a massive basketball stretch happening right now, spring practice around the corner, recruiting as always, and of course, Tennessee baseball. We've got it all at Volquest.com.
Yeah, lots of stuff going on. We talked about the recruiting calendar. I wrote about it on signing day in February, which was an irrelevant day for almost everybody in the country. And now they're talking about maybe potentially 3 signing days and drastic changes to the December calendar. Clearly, some changes are coming. So plenty of discussion about that, and obviously plenty of coverage of hoops as Tennessee's put themselves in a position to massively help themselves winning a league championship and being a number 1 seed. But they've got the hardest schedule of anybody in the league to close it out. Should be a fun 2 weeks.
Yep, and again, we'll have it all right here at Volquest.com. We'll get into your mailbag questions. We'll start with CheckerNeyland. Rob, this is for you. Would you rather have a 1 seed in the West with Arizona as your 2 seed, or a 2 seed closer to home?
I would personally rather have a 2 seed closer to home, but opinions vary on that, and I don't know if there's a right or a wrong answer. But just put me down for, and I don't know. I mean, what are the options there? If you're talking the Elite Eight, Hubbard, I know I looked them up the other night. I think it's Boston, Los Angeles, Dallas, and Detroit, I think. I mean, I don't know if there's a ton of difference. It's not like you're super close to home in that, that Sweet 16 Elite Eight round. So, I don't know if that makes a huge difference, but probably closer to home. But in those instances, Detroit, Dallas, Boston, not that much closer to home.
Well, and here's the thing too, that normally you would say, okay, I want to go here to avoid this team, right? This team's going to be the 1 seed and, in the South, and I don't want to be the 2 seed because of their matchup. But with what we've seen in college basketball this year, Rob, I mean, does it really matter? I mean, is the 1 seed vastly superior to anybody? Like, do you look at that and go, man, that's the hardest draw because they're the clear-cut best team or the clear-cut one of the 3 best teams? I mean, it's every night somebody's dropping a game somewhere, whether you're the one of the top 4 teams in the country or one of the top 10 teams in the country. I don't, because of the parity, I don't know that there's a whole lot of difference in being shipped west as a 1 versus being a number 2 seed in some other region with what we've seen throughout the season in college basketball.
Yeah, we're taping this, Kansas just lost at home, this week. I mean, I'm with you, Hubbard. It's been absolutely nuts. I don't see a super team, out there that you just terribly want to avoid. I mean, Tennessee's already played the the presumptive number 1 overall seed at Purdue, and they're good, but it's not like they're unbeatable or anything.
Let's go to Go Vols 182. The top 3 most important recruits that aren't currently committed. Austin.
Ooh. A good one. I'm going to go David Sanders 1. Any collection of, Juan Gaston, Jalen Matthews, the U2 kid at Bishop Gorman 2. Any of that's all. I'm going heavy on the offensive tackle.
So offensive tackle 1, offensive tackle 2.
Yeah, and then for me, I go Rodarius Jackson because you're in on Jamie French, you're in on Caleb Cunningham and Marcus Harris and Khalid Lockett down in Texas. But, none of those guys are given. So they could easily all end up elsewhere. You got to find a way to land Rodarius Jackson, who's going to continue to rocket up the boards, the wide receiver out of Memphis.
Austin Price pulling his best Danny White right there. It's all about offense and scoring points. You're only losing 9 defensive linemen off this roster. Don't you need a defensive lineman somewhere in your priority base?
Yeah, sure. I mean, you could go with the Grady kid. I mean, I don't disagree with what you're saying. I just feel like Tennessee's in a better position currently with the guys I named. So, when you're in a better position, you got to find a way to end that and land those kids. You know what I'm saying?
Time to land an elite offensive tackle in the recruiting ranks, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you that they need defensive. They need some high-end defensive guys. But at this current moment, I don't think I'm looking around going, yeah, they're definitely going to get that guy, or they're in line to get that guy.
Yeah,
I think when you're in line to be in play with somebody, I think you have to find a way to close some out. And don't get me wrong, David Sanders, Gaston, all those are big boy battles. They could easily lose any of those kids too. I just have a tough time seeing Tennessee not getting somebody out of that kind of quartet of tackles.
Let's go to volunteered 87. Since I hear multiple people across multiple conferences outlets talk about who would be the next team or teams to come to the SEC, can you explain why the SEC would take a team like Clemson or Virginia Tech? Doesn't the SEC already have a big TV market? Seems like they'd just be diluting the payouts to some by some points by slicing the pie into more pieces with schools that aren't national brands or adding some eyeballs to really move the needle going forward. SEC expansion, Brent, and if that does happen again, what are some of those teams that the SEC would go after?
Well, I think the only reason you're probably going that direction is if you're moving into this super conference world with a breakaway and you've got basically two conferences. I think one of the things if you're the SEC, and I think the TV market thing is overrated. Okay, let's look at the TV market of St. Louis and what that market's meant to the SEC. I would say basically nothing. No offense to Missouri, but I don't know that the juice was worth the squeeze. And for Missouri or for the SEC to marry that one together. It's about your traditional teams. It's about regional teams. We've talked about this numerous times on the podcast. I don't think UCLA going to Rutgers makes a lot of sense. I don't think the SEC wants to get into, hey, let's add, Arizona State to our conference so we can get the Phoenix market, right? I think you're going to do it and you're going to make sense with doing it. And if you're going to stay regional, then that's going to be the Florida States, the Clemsons, and that type of thing. Virginia Tech, if you look at football. I just don't think, Rob, that Greg Sankey's in some great, aggressive mode right now to add a bunch more teams to this league. I think it's just wait and see how this super conference thing pairs up and what happens with the NCAA moving forward before they get into, hey, let's just take somebody to take somebody.
Yeah, I agree with it, and I just base that on his track record as opposed to any kind of speculation. And he's been, even as it's gotten crazy. I mean, he's been pretty judicious, or the SEC has been pretty judicious. I mean, they've added people, but it's not been just like this mad grab. Like I feel like we saw for the Big Ten, where what's the word I'm looking for? Everybody in the SEC is geographically contiguous. Is that right, AP? Like you're not leapfrogging states. There's every state, is attached. I mean, it's one. Yeah. It may go from Texas to South Carolina or in Florida, but you don't leapfrog over a time zone like you do in the Big Ten now.
Which is why adding a school from Virginia or North Carolina ties into every bit of that, right? Like, there's no like we're going to add Colorado and everybody they're just going to be sitting on an island.
If I'm the SEC, I've got some curiosities. I just kind of want to step back and see where those Pac-12 schools are and where the Big Ten is after a year of that thing. And it's not just football, as we've talked about on this podcast many times, but don't you want to just kind of step back and go, all right, y'all be the guinea pigs on this deal. Let's see how that thing works before anybody gets some hankering that we need to, go dive into some, great move across the country for a TV market or for expansion just to say we're expanding.
Yeah, I don't want to harp on it because, like you said, Herbert, we've talked about it. But to me, it's more about what's the baseball coach feel, or the swim coach, because all those people are going to hate it. I guess my point is, are their voices going to matter? I mean, football, it's not going to be that big of a deal. I mean, basketball, it's going to be a little more of a headache. But those minor sports is what I can't wait to hear. I don't know, can't wait to hear is a little strong, but I'll be interested to see the feedback and how it affects that world.
All right, let's go to Ponyvol 14. What do you think went into the decision for Joakim Dodson to transfer from Collierville out to Baylor?
Well, I think for Joakim, Eric, the chance to play on a little bit bigger stage. Obviously they've got a ton of talent down at Baylor. Really, nice quarterback and the Cherry kid to throw to. He'll be opposite Cam Sparks, another nice wide receiver. that Tennessee's obviously in on. And the fact that I think Baylor's going to kind of adjust their line of thinking to let him graduate early. Same thing with George McIntyre. Like, BA's never really let kids graduate early. George McIntyre will be here in January, So, I mean, like, I think same type thing here. Like, I think the whole graduating early thing is a real thing. I think that, D2 AAA on the whole, they've not been real keen on that. But I think they're having to adjust or they're going to lose kids. I think the kid was very comfortable staying at Collierville. And then when, Baylor was willing to adjust, he adjusted, right? So, I mean, like, I think a lot of this boils down to, like, looking out for the best interests of the kids, getting kids that want to graduate early and can get it done, can get the academic requirements done. I think they should be letting them do that. And clearly some of these schools are pivoting and adjusting.
ImissDenariusMoore. It's a good question, Rob. 25 years from now, what do you think will be the narratives we use to describe this era of UT sports?
Well, I mean, who knows what the next 25 years are going to look like, but based off what's happened in this over the course of this last 25 until now, I would have to think you're going to look at it as a pretty prosperous time in UT athletics. To me, I mean, man, even if nobody's exactly winning a championship, your big three are relevant nationally. I mean, they're definitely relative in the SEC, but they're relevant nationally. And I don't think there's been a lot of times when you could say that about all three sports. I mean, and I don't think there's been many times where people even cared about baseball. I mean, Hubs, I know we talk about it all the time, but we've been doing this 20 years. You've been doing it longer, and I mean, for way more than half of those, the thought of going over there and covering a baseball game never even crossed our minds.
Right, exactly. I think when you look at it big picture, I think it's going to be, I mean, 25 years is a long time, but I think this current cycle that you're in right now, at the way it looks right now, it's going to be the cycle that recaptures a generation of fans after they lost a generation of fans in football. Again, I've talked about, I mean, Rob, you've got kids my age. We've got kids very similar in ages. They didn't grow up where, Tennessee football was the Mecca. I mean, they grew up where it was not very good and not very competitive. And I think where they're at right now, with where basketball's at, with where baseball's at, I think this is going to be an era that's got a chance to recapture a generation of fans, that you wondered if you were going to keep them because they were going to grow up with moms and dads that, maybe it was just kind of not a big deal, just kind of okay. But this has got a chance to rekindle that, which I think is a big deal.
Coreyton Vol 17 says, can anyone maybe expand on some of the ridiculous things that assistants, support staffers have done in order to make unofficial, official visits stand out to a recruit? I guess kind of talking about the cookies and the balloons and the decorating of the rooms and all that. What are some of the things that they do to kind of make those visits special?
Well, I mean, a lot, we make fun of the cookie rule and all that stuff, but I mean, they've limited some of that stuff. When you take away private planes and you take away the exuberant meals that they used to be able to do, with all that was documented with the kid from South Florida in that diary he did years ago that prompted some changes on what you could do. I think that Tennessee's done a good job, Austin, of using the river at different points in times to be a little bit different than other schools. But it's changing. Now, all of a sudden, you're trying to figure out how to be different in the summertime, which you can make that advantageous for you if you're smart, and you got to be creative with that because, it's not just about a January visit. I mean, one of Tennessee's best visit weekends was Martin Luther King weekend in January where everybody got snowed in and got stuck. There's nothing about that visit that said, hey, Tennessee put on the best show. It's just they all hung out for 4 days together, 4 or 5 days, because they couldn't get out of town. So it still goes back about, relationships more than it does the bells and the whistles, I guess.
I concur. Not much I can add to that. I mean, they try to if they know a particular kid likes this or that, they try to tailor, some things to a kid. But for the most part, I mean, a lot of these visits are still car wash type deals, right? I mean, like they're going to, every kid that goes on a visit, if they're walking away saying, man, that visit was terrible, then they probably either went into it with a mindset thinking it was going to be terrible, or something drastically went wrong, because it's hard to not have a good time. All these schools are going to show the best side of themselves.
And I think what's fascinating is just how different visits are across sports, right? Like in football, maybe you bump into a former player. Basketball, you might play a pickup game with a former player as well as the current players. I mean, it's just the whole mindset of official visits across various sports are different, which I find pretty fascinating. Basketball, Rob, don't you just basically try a kid out? Isn't that a lot of what basketball official visits are turned into?
Yeah, I mean, that's going to happen. I mean, I don't want, I wouldn't go so far as to call it a tryout, but they are certainly, I mean, they're certainly going to get a look at you playing, either 1-on-1, 3-on-3. You're going to have a basketball in your hands. You're out on the court.
Bonus question here from Corrington Vol 17. Do we think the NCAA has the guts to try and still throw a Hail Mary and maybe throw a notice of allegations at Tennessee to see if they can make a last-ditch attempt of relevance?
I mean, sure they could. I mean, nobody I've talked to believes that is coming anytime soon, if at all. But yeah, I mean, like, I would argue that even going down this road to begin with was dumb based off of, my knowledge of what they have on Tennessee. And this is just, I think, more of a, they didn't get their pound of flesh with the Jeremy Pruitt deal like they wanted. And, I think they tried to target Tennessee. They leaked stuff out and tried to run Tennessee through the mud, so to speak. And, Tennessee pushed back, and, it just did not end real well with this injunction for the NCAA, but that doesn't mean that they'll give up.
Let's go next to Groverlevy. Biggest question mark heading into spring practice for the offense, defense, and the special teams.
Punt returner, special teams wise, I guess.
Safety on defense for me.
I think the secondary in general, just trying to figure out the pieces to the puzzle. And then offensively,
left guard.
Yeah, I go left guard.
Yeah.
I don't think they'll solve left guard in spring practice. I don't think the secondary will be solved in spring practice either.
Definitely not. When are the updated or upgraded football facilities, excluding Neyland Stadium, due for completion? It feels like they've been working on the Anderson training facility for like a decade.
Can we say not a priority? I mean, to be honest with you, I mean, they're going to get the south end of the stadium done, and they're going to get Lindsey Nelson Stadium $90 million worth of work done before they finish that expansion to the Anderson Training Center. I mean, you go over there and take pictures, and there were 20 guys working at Lindsey Nelson Stadium, and there might have been 2 or 3 guys over at the Anderson Training Center. It's just not been – it's a long ways from being done from what I see, and I just don't think it's the major priority right now.
All right, we got plenty more questions we're going to get into as we continue on this edition of the Volquest Mailbag podcast. But first, let's get a word from our friends over at Exterior Home Solutions.
Severe weather can strike at any time in East Tennessee, and Mother Nature can do severe damage to the first and most important line of defense that you and your family have against Mother Nature, and that is your roof. Whenever she strikes, make sure that you call the people that I call. Make sure you trust the people that I trust. And that's my friends at Exterior Home Solutions, because they're more than friends, they're truly family.
Again, you can give them a call today at 865-524-5888, Exterior Home Solutions. Check them out online at exteriorhomesolutions.com. We will continue on with the questions here. Let's go to Andrew Akens. How are some of the young offensive linemen and defensive linemen doing, improving-wise, playing time? What's their outlook for next season? A lot of seniors on both sides, a lot of open slots for 25 that need to be filled with some of those young offensive linemen and defensive linemen.
Well, I think Austin, I don't think we know on the offensive linemen. I mean, I think that's what this spring should be about. No offense to Cooper Mays and those guys. I mean, I don't think you need to beat them up by any means. It's time to go find out if Vyson Lane can play center. It's time to try to build some depth for 24, but also for 25. I think you got a little better feel, Austin, or I do. I think defensively, because you like where Hobbs is. There's still a lot of positive buzz about Weathersby, even though he hadn't played. Nathan Robinson, it looks, dramatically different, and he's played a little bit. I think you got a little bit better feel for there. Plus, you got the The transfer from Stanford is going to be back for another year. So, I mean, you're going to have a little bit more veteran. You're not going to turn it over as much on defense as you are on offense because you're rotating so many guys as well.
Well, and there's the key word, rotation. Like Rodney plays a big rotation. So even a guy like Hobbs, as a freshman last year, played quite a bit. Caleb Herring got in football games. You know, before he got hurt, Tyree Weathersby, as you pointed out, was making plays in practice. The offensive line you don't hear about as much, the younger guys. So I do think that this is a big spring for those guys because you need to figure out kind of where they are, where they need to get to, and who can help you this fall.
And more on that, like on the defensive line, I mean, sure, you have a position you want your guy to play. Like he's going to play, the 3-tech. He's going to play the shade. He's going to play the Leo. He's going to play the defense, but there's versatility in those spots. Like David Hobbs can play a number of different spots. Weathersby can play a number of different spots. Jason Jenkins can play a couple different spots. Whereas it's a little bit different to where on offense, I mean, sure, you want to be able to cross-train some guys, but I mean, you're going into the season as a left guard, like primarily you're getting a lot of reps at left guard, So I just think it's a little bit different as well, and that's why I think the defensive line, to y'all's point, is a little bit further along in that regard.
Jenkins is an interesting deal just from a standpoint. He kind of came on at the end of last year, got some run in the bowl game, and then, if you happen to catch Balco Confidential with James Pierce, he's the one guy Pierce brought up, that he thinks is going to take a big step, heading into this season. So kind of interesting to see, kind of a forgotten man, I would say 6 to 8 months ago, not so much forgotten amongst people in that building.
And a guy, AP, that started kind of on the outside, and as time has gone on, he's kind of has the ability to play on the inside too.
Yeah, he's a big body.
Let's go to Big Orange 17. When do you expect the football kickoff times to be announced, and any rumblings on whether the Chattanooga game will get moved to Thursday?
I personally believe it will get moved to Thursday, Hobbs. I know they've not announced that. I don't think they've for sure made that decision yet, but I think that there was already a push for that. And then NC State moved their game from Saturday to Thursday. And so I just would be shocked if that game doesn't end up on Thursday. Maybe
I'll handle the 2-minute drill. You got rivalry Thursday that night, all right?
I don't know about shocked, but it's definitely on the table for discussion. Rob, I think one of the interesting things that is part of that discussion listen, football coaches want to play. If that gives them a chance to get a couple of days preparation for somebody, they're all about it. If it gives them a chance to start fall camp a day or two early, they're all about it. I think from an administrative standpoint, you got to look at, it's been a while since you opened on a Saturday in Neyland Stadium, and how big of a factor is that, knowing you're going to open, I guess, on a neutral site field next year? Is that a big deal to your fan base? Is that not a big deal to your fan base? I think that's something Danny White has to look at and dive into. Selfishly, I got no problem with Thursday night, but for the fans, I understand that that's not the greatest thing in the world.
Yeah, my biggest, not complaint, but my biggest, I guess, the thing that stands out the most to me about that, and what you'll hear about the most, is people coming from the mid-state or Atlanta area, or wherever, and I hear that. I think generally the opener is not going to be a great opponent. Or you're not going to play somebody great that early in the season. So the excitement is just about the atmosphere, the festivities around it. So if you move that from Saturday, I think you still allow that. But I see all sides. I certainly know why, like you say, Hubbard, if Josh Heupel could get an hour, or get started an hour earlier, he'd be all for it. But with so much of your alumni and support being in the mid-state, I personally don't like it. But I get why the Heupel and others do, for sure.
Well, anytime you get to sit around and be a fan and watch college football on Saturday, I'm for. Because we don't get to do that often. And also, I'm very much for it this year because there would be no 6 a.m. radio to wake up to, no all-nighters to be pulling after the 7 or 8 o'clock kickoff on Thursday night. So I'm all for it, too.
You would be able to watch football during the day on Saturday, but there'll be rivalry Thursday on Saturday.
That is correct. Always something there to bring me down. I'm just kidding. Let's go to Pine. And Pine says, what Vol game are you looking forward to covering the most next football season? Easy for me. That's Oklahoma. And what Vol college football game do you wish you could cover next football season? This is a fun question. I'll go Oklahoma for the game I'm looking forward to the most. Anybody else?
I'll go Arkansas. I don't know. I just love their setup out there. I just love that kind of it's on that hillside. And like how the stadium sets down into a little bit of a bowl. I like going to Arkansas. It's a tough place to get to, but once you're there, I do enjoy it.
It'll be my first trip to Fayetteville too.
Outside of that, I would say I'd love to go to a game at Camp Randall. I don't know if there's a specific game I want to go cover next year, but I would love to.
I'd love to see Ohio State, Michigan.
Yeah, I'd like to see it at Michigan.
Yeah.
I mean, I think, if you're saying road game, I guess Oklahoma, because there's a storyline there. I think the Alabama game here is going to be pretty fascinating because where's Alabama at compared to where they've been the last couple of years? I think that's always a good game to cover, and I think where Alabama is in this transition is going to be pretty fascinating to see as well. If I liked cold weather, I would love to go and watch Army Navy because I think that would be a really cool game and really cool. I just don't know that I could handle 3.5 hours.
Is it in Charlotte next year, Hubs?
Army Navy?
I'm pretty sure it's in Charlotte next year. I think it's a different site than they've been playing. They've been normally playing Baltimore, DC. Like last year, they played it up.
They didn't play BC last year?
In Boston, yeah. Let me look this up. Army Navy. You just keep Rob.
Brett, that's a good call because
picks.
I was gonna say bucket list all time would be an Army Navy game at some point. Yeah.
All right, Rob. Sure. Rob, what do you got? Where do you want to go see a game at?
I would probably Washington would be cool, something like that. No, not it would be. I'm like AP. It'd be more about going to see a place, any particular matchup for me.
Washington, Washington would be pretty cool. I think a pretty cool place to see a game. Kind of check out what they got going on.
Speaking of Washington, it's in Washington D.C. next year.
Yeah, I started to say Charlotte doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
Well, it didn't make sense to me either, but I don't know why that was in my head. But basically, it goes Washington D.C., Baltimore, and then New Jersey.
All right, so let's move on to Nashville 615. Got a couple of questions here. The first one, predict the wide receiver that ends up with the most catches and yards for Tennessee in 2024. Brent, I'll go Squirrel will lead in catches, and I'll go Squirrel will lead in yards. I guess that's just the easy way to do it. What about you?
I don't know. I mean, we'll see. It'll be the slot guy. I mean, the slot's the most productive spot in this deal. So, I mean, you would assume that's going to be Squirrel, but what does that slot position look like? What's their rotation like there? How do they go? I mean, I think, I don't. It's just a wild shot in the dark, right? Squirrel's the easiest answer, AP, because he's the most experienced guy at the most productive position coming
I'll
back.
take the guy that had double the amount of the number 2 receiver on Tennessee's roster last year, Squirrel White.
I don't
Different
think
quarterback going to spread the ball.
There you go.
Right.
I don't
You're
think
right.
you can make a guess on this because I think they will look different with Nico than they ever looked with Joe.
I agree.
Like a lot of that side-to-side stuff, I mean, it'll be there a little bit. I don't think it will be nearly as prevalent this fall. So I don't really think you can make a hardcore guess, on that. I would, I don't know. I don't know.
Rob, tell us why it's going to be Chaz Nimrod.
I don't think it will be Chaz Nimrod. I don't have anything interesting to add. I'll go Squirrel.
All right.
Safe bet.
Let's go here. What are you looking to see of Nico's development the most this spring if you're Joey Halze and Josh Heupel? What do you want to see from Nico this spring?
Well, continued feel for the game, quick reads, quick decisions. I mean, I think he's done a lot of things well. Again, I don't know how great Iowa was. So how is he with the speed of the game, different looks? I mean, there's going to be a lot of things he thinks he's seen, Eric, that he hasn't seen yet. So it's just, to me, it's going to be about growth from week to week. He's not going to be perfect the first part of the season. There's going to be growing pains. He's going to throw a pick. He's going to fumble, make a mistake, and do some things. How does he bounce back from that? And, how does he handle the speed of the SEC versus the speed of Iowa? I mean, it's different. I know he got sacked a bunch, but, I mean, no offense to Iowa, who, quote, had a good defense, but it'll be different for him that way. So just, probably the speed of play, decision-making, all that kind of stuff.
Hey, I don't care who you are. You allow 4 rushing touchdowns in 13 games. It's pretty good. And then, of course, it's Nico. He's quarterback, but, Nico gets in there 3 times.
I can watch Tennessee play Iowa 10 times. Tennessee's going to score 30+, and Iowa's not going to score 14 points.
Well, I'm with you on the Iowa not scoring 14 points for sure.
And Tennessee's going to score 30 every time against them. They just are. I mean, no offense. I mean, I'm not saying it's a bad defense, but
not to get off on the sidebar here, but if it wasn't for Tennessee's defense, Tennessee wouldn't have scored 30 in the ball game.
Yeah, but they also played with a guy who was playing his first real snaps at quarterback. That counted. Yeah. I'm just telling you, you line up and do that, they're going to score points against them.
Not that I'm disagreeing with you.
Very few elite playmakers on the outside.
Yeah, I mean, you didn't have your best running back.
I mean, I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm just
saying the offensive line wasn't the same either.
The defense was a major reason why for that football game. Obviously, James Pierce. Last one here from Nashville 615. Would UT ever start the Memphis series in football or in other sports again? I get beef with Penny. Regional rivalries is one of the most fun things about college sports. Tennessee playing Memphis in football. No, Tennessee baseball plays Memphis every couple of years. Tennessee basketball, has that come back, Rob? What about Memphis here?
I don't see it in basketball.
No, I mean, what's the advantage for Tennessee to play that game in any sport?
Well, there's no advantage.
None for me. I mean, Tennessee fans that live in Memphis don't like to hear you say it, but there's no advantage.
The only reason they played, sorry, AP, the only reason they played it in football this last time is the people on Capitol Hill got it going there and got the presidents to agree to play, and I don't see that happening. AP,
you talking about the 2010 game?
Yeah, the last time they played, that was all political pressure.
Yeah, so in 2010, my fond memory of that is walking into the Liberty Bowl. The governor's going to be there, right? So you'd think there'd be a little bit extra security. No, they didn't check anything. Like, we just walked straight in. We could have 74 bombs, and no one checked anything. Like, I was just like, well, this makes me feel safe. I mean, like, that's my memory from the Liberty Bowl.
There is a lot of places, not going to name venues, but there's a lot of places around the region to where if you're media, you can walk in with whatever you want because they're not checking those bags. They're just putting that little tag on it, moving you along, which I'm fond of because I'm always in a hurry. But whereas if you're a fan, you got to go through the metal detector and you got to get patted down and everything. But like media, you're just like, oh, let me tag your bag here. Go on. Yeah, it's kind of funny. Let's go to CadesCoveVol. Which transfer defensive back are you most excited to see on the practice field this spring? For me, it's Jamal McCoy.
Yeah, agreed.
2022 versus 2024 football teams by position group. This is interesting. Quarterback, I would go 22 because we haven't seen Nico play. Anybody disagree?
Yeah, I mean, right now you take Hendon Hooker based on what he did in 22. Because you're talking about the results of 22 versus the projection of what you think you're going to be in 24. So it's not an apples to apples comparison. Right? No. I mean, you're guessing a lot of what 24 is going to look. Do I think Nico can end up being a better quarterback than Hendon Hooker in some ways? Sure. But when I look at Hendon Hooker's production, I'm taking Hendon Hooker because I know what I've got there in this offense.
So on that same preface, running backs, I would take the running backs as we saw what Jalen Wright would eventually become, and we just don't know about Sampson and Selden being the guys yet. Tight ends, I guess I would take 2022's tight ends. Princeton Fan had a really good year. Wide receivers, hard to argue with what Jalen Hyatt did in 2022, so I'd take 2022's wide receivers.
But see, I'm with Hubs, though. So much of this is just unknown. Like, you don't know what Holden States is. You don't know what Chris Brazel is. You don't know. I mean, you know what I'm saying?
But will anybody have an impact like Princeton Fan had on your team in 2022?
Well, I don't know because I don't know how they're going to use them. I mean, did anybody going into 22 going, man, we can't live without Princeton Fan? Holy smokes, how are we going to play football? Princeton Fan's not on the team. I just don't think it. I don't think it's a. I'm not trying to pick on the poster. I think it's a question that you can't answer. But I do think questions like you're seeing on the board, Rob, where you're comparing the Grant Williams senior year basketball team to this basketball team that's got 28 games under their belt. You can have those discussions with some merit to it. It's hard to have a discussion about. I mean, why don't we say, well, what's the 22 team going to look like versus the 26 team with George McIntyre at quarterback?
I think the best thing would be to go back, Rob, and if Tennessee, let's say Tennessee goes 10-2 this fall, is at that point revisit this and go, okay, now let's go.
No, that's not the best way. It's the only way. Yeah. I mean, otherwise it's like I don't. Go ahead.
Well, I mean, remember this time a year ago, everybody was talking about there's not going to be a big drop off from Jalen Hyatt to Dante Thornton because Dante Thornton.
It's
he was a freak athlete, right?
It's impossible to say that right now.
Sure.
Let's go to Sam Smith, 22-33. Alabama went to Kentucky School of Defense, but man, can they score outside of Sears? Who scares you the most on that roster, Rob?
Man, I don't know that there's a number. I don't know that number 2 stands out. I mean, I guess Griffith is it Griffiths, the kid that's been playing with a Band-Aid over his eye the past couple games.
Yeah. To me, Rob, it's all about Sears giving those guys look with his dribble penetration, right? Those guys getting around shooting threes.
They don't have. I mean, they've long bouncy bigs, but I mean they don't have crazy bigs that are crazy great scorers. That's a pretty good. Now that you mentioned that, that's a pretty good question because I don't know who I would really say is worries me outside of and I don't study Alabama basketball religiously, but that's when you start thinking about who is Robin, his AP's favorite analogy, who's Mark Sears' Robin, that's pretty good.
To me, it's whoever's standing on the baseline for the wide open three when the help defense
when he kicks it out.
If that guy's making shots, they're totally different. In the first half against Florida, that guy didn't make any shots. Second half against Florida, they made 3 or 4, and that was the difference in the game to get it to overtime.
Yeah, I mean, Estrada to me is, he's good, but he's not special. I mean, there's such a big drop off after Sears. Griffin can make shots. Estrada can make shots. Who's the other kid? I can't. Nelson, Grant Nelson. To me, just not a lot of separation of those guys outside of Sears. I mean, to me, a huge drop off. I mean, pretty much the same as you would say. Who outside of Dalton Connect, who do you worry about with Tennessee? Big drop off.
All right, a couple of baseball ones here real quick from Sam. Do you think Drew Beam is locked into Saturdays, or could he move up if A.J. Russell isn't ready for Tuscaloosa? Yeah, I think that's a possibility if Russell isn't ready to begin SEC play. I certainly think that's a possibility, but they really like Beam on Saturdays. They've, Tony Vitello said that pretty much in every press conference. They like having a guy that you know exactly what you're going to get on Saturdays, but I do think that could be a possibility if Russell were not to be back. Does the outfield mix of KT, Dylan Bargo, and Robin Villanueva together scare you in a big ballpark? Absolutely. Look good in Lindsey Nelson Stadium. Lindsey Nelson Stadium is a tiny ballpark. Do I think it's enough to not to see that when you go on the road or something? No. I mean, I think they've proven that they can absolutely get out there and play. I think KT has shown that he's played pretty good center field the last couple of games. He's got an arm to play anywhere. But does it scare you a little bit? A little bit, but I still want to see that combination out there. And I think Tennessee's proving that he can play that combination in the outfield the last couple of games. It's been fun to watch. But to your point, we'll see when they go on the road. And then staff has 2 major guys who are injured now. Should there be any worry about that? I mean, I don't know enough about forearm injuries and, soreness of the side and stuff like that to really even get into that. Dean Curley's going to be okay. He got hit in the head with a pitch. What are you going to do about that? Stamos, we'll see, from last night. And, of course, A.J. Russell's making his way back. I can't comment on that because I don't know enough about that type of stuff for baseball players. A couple more here. Let's hit them pretty quick here. Let's go to Athrun. Could the cloud of NCAA notice of allegation stuff keep us from a top 5 class in recruiting?
I'm going to go no. Do I think it could impact 1 or 2 kids? Absolutely. Absolutely. But do I think it's going to hurt dramatically? No, I do not.
Next recruit to commit within 15 days or 30 days?
Go 30 days.
Predicted best overall player from the 2024 class and as college this year does not have to be a UT player.
Yeah, I don't know because
just make it simple. Make it UT player.
I'm gonna go Jordan Ross.
And will we have more than a 5-man rotation out receiver this season? It's a good question, Brent. I mean, I feel like we always think that it's a 3-man when everyone's healthy. Tennessee played a lot more receivers last year, but you kind of had to because of the lack of production and the injuries. Do you think Tennessee will play 5 receivers or probably less than that?
I think it depends on how they're playing. You know, I mean, I think that with this offense and the way this offense goes, then, you know, if somebody's being productive, you're probably not taking that guy off the field, right? If, you know, I mean, do I think they will work some guys in, you know, earlier in the game and try to be a little more, have a little more depth? Sure, I think there will. But I think at some point it comes back to, you know, your production. If you're not going to produce when you're given an opportunity, you're not going to play. You know, and that was the case a couple of years ago where Tennessee just basically shelved it and went to 3 guys. I think they would like to play more than 3. I think they have the talent to play more than 3. So they will be more than 3 this year. But I don't know that it's every other series you're going to see a wholesale change of a bunch of wide receivers out there. But they'll play more than 3. They're much better than they were 3 years ago there, AP, I guess, whenever they shelved, you know, those guys because they couldn't catch the ball and they decided to only play 3. They'll play more than 3.
Robo22 says, with the ruling on Friday, how do you see things changing for schools in name, image, and likeness? Is it possible for schools and coaches to now discuss NIL options straight up with recruits? Could this actually cause the collectives to merge into a different role if schools can openly discuss NIL deals with recruits? Which schools will be first to test those waters? Kind of a loaded question, AP, but take a stab at it.
That's what the whole thing was about, is the ability to negotiate before you make a decision. And so, that's right now until it goes to trial or until they say otherwise, the injunction allows, Ole Miss's collective or Tennessee's collective or Alabama's collective to go out and talk to a recruit and discuss, kind of their thoughts on, the value.
I don't know that anybody's going to move their NIL collective in-house right away. I think that everybody's going to kind of wait and see, is this thing going to court? What are some things that come out of, discussion about NIL before that they just pack up and say, hey, we're absorbing the collective and bringing it in-house. But clearly there's going to be more promotion. There's going to be more open discussion. As AP mentioned, that's the whole reason for the case for recruits. I mean, that's just, now it takes the whole talking in code and all this other stuff out of the equation. Now you can send a contract to a high school kid.
Does that mean I don't have to talk in code anymore?
It means the kid's going to get a PDF. He's going to get a PDF on his phone that says, hey, if you sign here, here's what you're going to make. Not here's what the average of your position makes. This is what your deal is going to be if you sign with this school. That's
basically what it made, the injunction allowed Matt Hibbs, who runs Georgia's collective, or Hunter Badur, who is one of the late league guys at Spire. They could walk up and talk to a recruit right in front of somebody from the NCAA, and they can't do anything about it.
Yep.
Last question. We'll end with UT champions. Who is the better steamed sandwich, Gus's or Sam and Andy's?
I'm going Gus's.
AP?
Gus's.
Rob?
AP, when's the last time you had a steamed sandwich, AP?
About 2 years ago.
I don't see a big difference in either one of them.
I've not had a steamed
sandwich. Too far away
sandwich
from Rob's house. He doesn't venture that far.
I've had both in the not too recent past.
I will go Sam and Andy's as well. Big thanks, everybody, for sending in your questions. Got through a lot of these here today, so I appreciate that. As always, big thanks to Exterior Home Solutions for being the presenting sponsor of this podcast. Local and trusted since 1999. If you have a need for roofing, a garage, windows, siding, contact Exterior Home Solutions today. They lead East Tennessee in renovations, and they can help you as well. 865-524-5888 or online at exteriorhomesolutions.com. For Rob Lewis, Austin Price, and Brent Hubbs, I'm Eric Kane. Appreciate you guys for joining us here today on the Volquest Mailbag Podcast.